Ona Judge was one of 9 enslaved Black people forced to work and live at President George Washington's Philadelphia home before she escaped to freedom. The current president has tried to suppress her story and the story of other enslaved people who were held here in Philadelphia. Now, there is an extraordinary and permanent response. This Thursday is the first ever annual Ona Judge Day in the city. It's Tuesday, May 19th. I'm Trenae Nuri, and here's how activists, a journalist, and a city council resolution gave us Ona Judge Day every May 21st. I'm here with Ronnie Polaneczky, senior editor at Philadelphia Magazine, and Carl Singley, retired lawyer and co-founder of the Ona Judge Coalition. Thank you both so much for joining me. Let's get right into it. First off, congratulations. Through the efforts of the Philadelphia Magazine, the Philadelphia Citizen, Avenging the Ancestors Coalition, and the Ona Judge Coalition, you all successfully petitioned the city to officially recognize May 21st as Ona Judge Day in Philly. Before we get into how you all were able to pull this off, let's talk about who Ona Judge was.
So I'd like to say, who is Ona Judge? Not who was Ona Judge, because her spirit, her bravery, her resilience, her audacity lives on from 1796. And I think I was intrigued. I have actually read Erica Dunbar's book,
Never Caught.
Never Caught, the Washington's relentless pursuit of their slave, Ona Judge. I've read it. I've listened to the book. I'm reading it again. And I think Ronnie's reaction was the same as mine. The idea, the audacity of a woman in 1796 in Philadelphia to decide to escape bondage from the most powerful man in North America and decide that she wanted to be free at all cost and eluded every effort that he made, every entree, every threat, every plea to return into bondage. It's just stunning. And she's one of those unsung sheroes who sort of represent the sort of audacity, the resilience, the courage, and the bravery of Black women for the last 250 years, but women in general. And so she is a role model for the young people who can understand when the times seem the darkest, when you have no right to aspirations and hope. You get on a ship called Nancy and travel all the way to New Hampshire and live to be 75 years old. Wow. So I was inspired. And I'm telling you, even now when I think about it, I kind of laugh out loud when I think about it. Because when Washington was sending people trying to trap her, con her, she said what we said in the Black community: I ain't studying you. I ain't thinking about you. I'm staying here. When they threatened to harm her family. And if you think about it, she had help from Absalom Jones and Richard Allen,
who were also prominent Philadelphians at the time.
Absolutely.
In the free Black community here.
So the idea that we talk about Rosa Parks, we talk about Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, all of whom are real sheroes, Fannie Lou Hamer, Mamie Till, Ida B. Wells, all of them who demonstrated courage in the face of of overwhelming force and disadvantage. The idea that an uneducated Black woman would slip away with the help of Black people, on her own, get on a ship, no money, no clothes, and decide to start a life. Freedom was that important. So I just felt, and I still feel that was a story that needed to be told. Now, the fuse for this was Ronnie and Philadelphia Magazine. I know Mike and ATAC has been celebrating it informally over the last years. But Philadelphia Magazine and Ronnie decided, let's get a petition started. Let's light a fuse, because this is a story that needs to be told. And we came along. We got our marching orders, and we said, we're in.
Ronnie, how did this collaboration come about?
So I had been aware of ATAC from the very beginning.
And what's ATAC?
Avenging the Ancestors Coalition. So Michael Cord was the one who was the co-founder of that way back. So just real quick, a
2010.
But the house, the foundation was uncovered back in 2002. So,
and when you're saying the house, you're referring to the president's house at 6th and Market Streets. Mm-hmm.
So the way this had started was that the Liberty Bell Pavilion was going to be moved from one side of Independence Park, and it was going to be placed at the corner of 6th and Market Street. It was because it just needed like expansion. In the course of doing excavation there, they came upon what they realized was the foundation for the president's house. And the more they dug and sort of preserved it, they realized that slaves had been held there. And it was such a riveting thing for people to think, oh, wait, George Washington had slaves in Philadelphia? I mean, this was a free community for Blacks, which was stunning to hear. So, and a lot of people were very upset to hear this. And Michael and a growing number of people were saying, we need to memorialize the enslaved people who lived here, because to put the Liberty Bell on top of where people were enslaved is just a joke. It's a hypocrisy. It's a desecration of this land. So it took a couple of years of really, really good-hearted, well-intentioned people having very difficult conversations until the decision was made and funding was raised to do the President's House, which is an outdoor exhibit that had panels of the 9 enslaved men and women who had been there. So we know all of their names, at least their first names. Ona Judge's name stood out because she was the one who actually escaped. So that memorial went up. And then for the last, I think starting in 2010, I think is when Michael Cord and ATAC began just every May 21st, which is the anniversary of her escape, just holding like a little ceremony there. And it was just the loveliest thing. And it's important to know that the Slavery Memorial in Philadelphia is the only one in the country sitting on federal property. So it's the federal government's only place for it. Anyway, all seemed like this is good. And in January is when Donald Trump ordered that those panels be removed. He said that the messages there were corrosive, and the blowback was immediate. Mayor Parker immediately filed a lawsuit. There's a lot of legal things that Carl can get into, just sort of the legal steps that have been taken. So I'm watching this, and I remembered covering the whole President's House, like that whole journey to get it from an idea into a thing. And I was just gutted by how could they do this, right? So then another judge came in and she had an injunction that said, okay, the panels have to go back up until this lawsuit is finished. And I'm thinking, another judge who doesn't feel this way could come in and say, take them back down. Another president could come in and say, take it back down again. And I thought, what are we really trying to preserve here? And I thought Philadelphia needs to celebrate Ona Judge herself, because you could try to enslave her story, but you cannot take her name out of our mouths. And we ought to tell her story. Every May 21st, it should be a Philadelphia Day where we talk about Ona. And in speaking about her, we sort of give some voice to the millions of slaves who died with no one ever knowing their name. We don't know anything about their lives. So it puts a lot of pressure on our Ona to be the representative for all of that. But as Carl said, her story is just extraordinary. And the thing I think is so moving too is that when she escaped, she had been Martha Washington's personal servant. And she lived indoors. She had nice clothes, and everyone said, well, she was treated very well. And what she knew, though, in Philadelphia, if you were a Black person in Philadelphia, if you resided here for 6 months, by the 6-month date, you were free. George Washington would just rotate his slaves out when that 6-month deadline was coming up, and then bring them back in, and the clock would start ticking again. Ona knew that she had overheard that Martha Washington planned to give her to her granddaughter as a wedding gift. And her granddaughter, she knew to be a cruel person. And I think Erica in her book it was questionable what her husband was like. So, if you were a young woman in a house, your body belonged to everybody. So I don't know that was part of it. But if I were 22 looking around, it must have been on her mind. So that's why she fled. And when she fled, her life wasn't easy. I mean, she was doing like hard manual labor. The money was always tight. She was always looking over her shoulder. Not only she was still part of the Washington's estate, but her 3 children were, because they were born to her and she was their property. So she was always worried about what might happen. And so for her, the stakes were so high. There was so much to lose. And the fact that she was asked toward the end of her life, basically, would you do it again? And she was like, in a heartbeat. Of course, I died. I am dying a free woman. So it's just the most stunning, beautiful story. To have somebody try to soften it to be less than what it is, it's just, it's insulting. It's really insulting. So in her later years, Ona was interviewed in a abolitionist newspaper. And this is the thing that's been a real gift, is that we have her actual words. Other enslaved people, we don't have their actual words, but we have hers. And she was asked basically, would she do it again? And she said, absolutely. And she talked about how she was, she is a child of God and entitled to the freedoms and liberties of a child of God.
One other quick thing, too. She never revealed the names of the people who worked to help her escape after several people attempted to get her to do it. The other sad thing is she outlived her children. So she buried her own children. And I think, as Ronnie is pointing out, that's a different story than Harriet Tubman. It's a different story than Sojourner Truth, Fannie Lou Hamer. It, in and of itself, 1796, and the audacity and the courage that took, and just trying to imagine how apprehensive she was every day of her life.
We have more on this story after the break. As America turns 250, let's explore a bold question together in the city where it started. What does democracy's future look like? TED Democracy Philadelphia Founding Futures is a can't-miss event featuring more than 15 brand new TED Talks centered around the past, present, and future of modern democracy. So on Saturday, June 13th, at the Kimmel Center for the Performing Arts in Philadelphia, is a day designed to challenge your perspective, spark your imagination, and inspire you to take action. Ticket prices start at just $26. Use the exclusive promo code CityCastPhilly for 15% off tickets. Learn more and buy tickets at visitphilly.com/TED2026. May 21st was the day that she escaped. And what you all are telling me, the Washington family continued for years to try to find her and try to bring her back into slavery. And what you were saying earlier too, Ronnie, is that this was a time that American society was horrific and deadly and dehumanizing Black people. At the time, we were thought of as property during American slavery. And so the idea of someone, I guess, giving that justification, well, she was treated well, she got nice clothes, or the folks that worked and lived in this home at 6th and Market Streets were given clothes and things like that. But I recently, as the legal battle was happening at the president's house, I went on a walking tour with 1838 Black Metropolis. Yeah. And it was focused on the free Black society of like 1838. And there's this space in between the president's house, the area where you see the names listed, and the Liberty Bell. And it's a small space. Yeah. It's like wooden slabs almost, with words and affirming words and things like that. But the tour guides told us this is where they slept. I looked at my son and he looked at me and I'm like, this is a very small space for even the both of us. So 9 people fitting in here, it doesn't seem like great conditions.
Trenae, let me say this. Have you seen the pictures of slaves crammed in the holds of slave ships, lined up like dominoes next to each other, shackled together? So what you saw, even in those quarters, relatively speaking, was a far cry from how the rest of the slaves. You had house Negroes and you had field Negroes. Here's what I want to say to you about the location and the dispute over which panels go back up or don't go back up. The story isn't the panels. The panels and their removal are simply artifacts of contemporary efforts to erase an inconvenient truth. That's what the removal of the panels. Now, there were 34 panels. Only 16 were restored, by the way. And one of our colleagues in a call yesterday, Sarah Lomax at Word, basically said she went down there recently and discovered that it's a mess. And the fact of the matter is, Ona Judge Coalition decided we are not going to wait for the federal government to tell this story. We're not going to wait for the courts to litigate which version of history gets preserved. So that we're going to tell this story both in terms, and I'll get into some of the details later, but we're going to approach this thing using contemporary storytelling that's going to be analog and digital. Analog in the sense of panel discussions, but we also are creating augmented reality apps so that someone can download a QR code from certain locations in the city of Philadelphia near the president's house and then point their smartphones at those murals or those empty spaces and reconstruct that story. We're using social media, we're using all of the platforms, and we're using all of these ways of telling that story, including teach-ins with the superintendent of schools. We're going to do it at the Free Library, at Girard College, at Belmont Mansion, where scholars, Black and white, women, will continue to tell the story. So in a way, the decision to remove those panels is a gift because we were galvanized. That decision lit a fuse about let's make sure that this so-called inconvenient truth, that July 4th, 2026 does not pass without the world knowing the true story of Ona Judge.
You all got this done at an incredibly pivotal moment in American history. This year is the 250th anniversary of the nation. Do you think it's patriotic to point out some of the difficult and troubling aspects of American history, the hypocrisies, the ironies, and why is it important?
Yeah, I mean, it's just true. It's just true. It's how can anybody be vilified for pointing out something that's true? What's true is that
truth to power.
Truth to power, but it's just true. And that is the founding contradiction of this country, is that we talked about freedom and liberty while enslaving human beings. Wow, that's something. And as I had said the other day when Carl and I were talking, I think America at the wise, mature age of 250, I think we are capable of holding our arms wide enough to hold all of what is true. Not some of it, all of it. And all of it is that those founding fathers wrote some of the most beautiful words that had to do with liberty and freedom and personal agency. And they held slaves. We have to hold our arms for all of it because it's all true. And to try to shut out any part of it it's like what a toddler would do. Well, we're 250 years old now. We are past toddler infancy stage. It's time now to just be wise and accept all of what's true. We can't untrue it, but let's tell it. And bigger, let's learn from it. Let's learn from it.
And it's to answer your question in a different way, it is unpatriotic not to. So if you look at the Ona Judge logo, it is red, white, and blue. And what you'll also see at the event that we're having on the 21st, I will be wearing a blue suit, a white shirt, and a red tie. That's because that history, that tie, that flag, those colors don't belong to the bad guys. A lot of people lost their lives to argue about those freedoms, even when the reality was different from the lives that people lived on a daily basis. So it's unpatriotic to not bring out those truths. They are inconvenient, but the story is going to be told. Now, at this moment in our history, when there are reasons to believe that all is lost and American exceptionalism is no longer a reality, It's time for people from different sectors, different backgrounds to stand up and say, we don't accept, we're not discouraged by the state of affairs that we see in our country. Martin Luther King said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. I have to tell you that over the last year, I've had my doubts. And that comes from a Black kid who grew up in Alabama in the middle of the Civil Rights Movement, marched in the Selma to Montgomery March, and was the beneficiary over the last 60 years of all of the civil rights changes. And now to see those eroded, I'm not discouraged at all. I'm encouraged. And we defy, we struggle, we use whatever tools are at our disposal, because as Lincoln said, that if this nation can long endure, and we've survived a lot, but I think this is one of the major challenges. It's an existential threat to basic American principles and ideas. And everybody who cares about what this nation was intended to be, they have a sacred obligation to defy, to resist, and fight in whichever ways they can. This is our country, and we can't abdicate our obligation to protect what it has become as opposed to what it was.
Where are we currently with the legal battle over the president's house exhibit?
I think it's important to acknowledge that the legal battle is an important effort to vindicate an idea. And the idea that it seeks to vindicate is what Ronnie talked about earlier. It's the idea that these inconvenient truths ought to be easily eliminated, erased at the whim and caprice of whoever happens to be in power at a given moment in time. And it's an act of defiance. And Philadelphia is ground zero, as Ronnie pointed out. We have the only exhibit of its kind in Philadelphia. But if you think about it, what if all of a sudden, and that's not likely to happen any more than it's snowing in Philadelphia in May or June, is what if the Trump administration said, you know what, put the panels back up just like they are. Are we going to stop our work? No, we're not. Because guess what? Putting them up and taking them down is whimsical. And we shouldn't be at the mercy of whoever happens to be in power. Now, the problem with litigation, and that's why you have alternative strategies, it is an arduous, time-consuming process. My prediction is that there's no chance that those panels go back up before next year this time, at the earliest. So what are we as responsible citizens to do, knowing what we now know about the story that we are now trying to tell? So what are we to do? Just accept that as the end of our struggle? That has never been the case. This story is too vital to too many different sectors of society. And we are presenting for the nation an example of special, eloquent, strategic resistance to an effort to change the way history is told.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll have more after this. Ronnie, why was it important for a media outlet to come together with community activists and groups to make Ona Judge Day happen?
I was so impressed with what Michael Cord's group did. Like every year, they would have their own Ona Judge celebrations. And when the panels were taken down, it seemed like they need an assist. Like they can't tell Ona Judge's story to the depth and breadth of people who are, I think, available to listen to it and hear it. And I thought this is just wrong. What that group did in bringing that memorial together took everything. It took all of the kind of work that real like organizing and community discussions and civic engagement. It took all of it and it was being torn down. And, you know, the media, it's terrible how we've been seen as like the enemy of the people. But the thing that we can do is we can amplify voices. And sometimes people will say, oh, you know, the media gives voice to the voiceless. I totally disagree with that. Those people have voices and they're screaming, but the people who should be listening aren't. So what the media can do is we can amplify those so that they have no choice but to hear them. And so with this story, I thought Ona's voice is not being heard. Ona's story is not being heard. And the advocacy groups that want the memorial restored, I don't think their voices are being heard. And so the media, we can amplify the voice by telling a story. So I had, the magazine has a different section that has opinions. So I wrote this opinion that said we need to make a National Ona Judge Day. But I wanted it to not just be like my opinion, because I thought Michael Court has been all over this for years. So I interviewed Michael and Carl, and Chris Rabb had tried to get a declaration through in the State House, a few years back, and just said, what do you think about a local annual official Ona Judge Day? And everybody was like, we're all about it. So I wanted to be sure that the people who had already been doing the work of telling her story didn't feel like there was something untoward about a columnist saying, here's what we need. And they might have come back and said, oh my God, we don't need that. The thing we need is this, but they were so all about it. And so then I wrote the story, and then didn't know if the story was going to get any kind of, like, if the concept of this would be able to get any traction. So that's when we thought, well, why don't we just do a petition to layer on top of what the opinion piece was trying to do itself. That's when we got the petition going.
And let me tell you my reaction to it. It was audacious. I choose that word in the sense that the magazine and Ronnie had a choice to not do it. And that happens. The one thing that a lot of journalists are electing to do in this climate is they're not audacious. They're not telling the stories that need to be told. And I use that word because that requires that you have a profound sense of the righteousness of what it is you're doing. And you are willing to take a public stand. And to whatever slings and arrows you get, you said, bring them on, but I will be judged by the decency and the truth of the work I'm doing. So when I talked to Ronnie, I think we met, 2 months ago? If it was that long ago, maybe a month ago.
2 months.
2 months.
About, yeah.
And you remember Obama wrote a book called The Audacity of Hope.
Yeah.
Ona Judge was audacious. That's a word that describes courage and willingness and resilience and resourcefulness to get to the truth and to vindicate and advocate for the truth. So we welcome Michael, we welcome Ronnie, we welcome all allies from whatever sector of society you come who need to stand up in this moment and says that we're really better than people think we are as a country.
Wow, so profound. What sorts of events are happening on Thursday, May 21st to celebrate Ona Judge Day?
What we have planned is an event at the Independence Visitor Center that will feature Dr. Dunbar, as well as a proclamation from the city honoring Ona Judge Day that Cindy Bass introduced, as well as a proclamation or resolution recognizing the work that has been done. We expect that the mayor will speak as well. It's going to be well attended. We're going to honor Mike Cord and the work that he's done. We're going to honor Ross McPherson, whose Preservation Alliance has been working with one of the groups that in 2010 started this work. And we're going to do it with the view, when you look out of Independence Visitor Center, you can see the president's house within literally eyesight. So it's going to be a dramatic event. And we got people from our group as multiracial, ecumenical, nonpartisan. I was going to say non-political, but whenever you aggressively assert truth, that's a political statement. So we're not non-political in that sense. And Ronnie is going to be there with her crew, and it's going to be a time that we are celebrating. And we have subsequent events planned. What I did want to tell you, there's a mural that's being installed in 2 days after the 21st in New Hampshire that honors her. We intend to either install a similar mural at the African American Museum. And if the panels are not restored, we will get as many of those that we can get and install them as artifacts at the exterior of the African American Museum, which, by the way, is one of our allies and is celebrating their 50th anniversary this July as well. There's going to be panel discussions over the next several weeks and days at Girard College with women scholars. The superintendent of schools is going to interview Dr. Dunbar. We're distributing thousands of books in the Young People's Readers Edition, and for high school students at Girard College in the public school system. We have discussions at the free library. So we're going to be celebrating this all the way up to July 4th and beyond.
So exciting. Is the event that's happening at Independence Visitor Center, is that free or is it a ticketed event?
Well, it's free. Let me put it like that. We're raising money, and anybody who wants to give money can do so by sending it to the Ona Judge Coalition at the Urban Affairs Coalition. But it is free and open to the public. Their invitations will go out, but we're not turning away anybody.
Carl and Ronnie, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of CityCast Philly today.
Thanks for having us.
It was a pleasure. Always good to see my buddy Ronnie and to tell our story.
What an incredible story. That's all for today here on CityCast Philly. If you enjoyed this episode about how Ona Judge Day came to be, share this episode with a friend. Also, rate the show, leave us a review, and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to sign up for our morning newsletter to learn more about what else Philly's talking about. And don't forget, you can support the show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Philly neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with the results of the election. Talk to you later. Bye.